You don't see BNSF diesels on the Union Pacific Evanston Subdivision very often, but one did appear on my layout a couple of days ago. What's it doing on my layout? Well, today I'd like to suggest some prototypical reasons why it might be there. That's coming right up. Hi, I'm Roy Smith. When I began to build my layout back in 2014, there were two things that I thought would never appear on the layout. The first of these two things was an Amtrak passenger train. I thought Amtrak would not show up on my modern era layout because Amtrak discontinued its service across southern Wyoming in 1997. Well, as I learned later on, Amtrak reroutes its California Zephyr across southern Wyoming when the main route across Colorado is closed for repairs and maintenance. That's why there's an Amtrak train on my layout. The second thing I thought you would never see on my layout was a BNSF unit, because BNSF units are seldom seen on the Union Pacific Evanston Subdivision. Well, now there's a BNSF SD70 ACE on my layout, and I've just ordered a second BNSF diesel, an ES44AC. I believe I can justify the presence of a limited number of BNSF units on my layout in prototypical terms. At least I'm going to try to do so in this video. First, though, I need to mention that I have never worked for a real railroad. So what I'm about to say may contain a lot of errors. Where I make errors in this video, I hope you will set me straight in the comments section down below, because for me, it's important to try to operate my layout like the prototype. Several of you have already told me why a BNSF diesel might be seen on the UP Evanston sub in response to my previous videos and Facebook postings. And I want you to know how much I appreciate that. Your explanations are included in this video. At this point, you might be thinking, that BNSF diesel is on the layout because I ordered it, it came in the mail, and I put it on the layout. That would be true. You might also be thinking, it's on my layout and I can put anything I want on my layout. That would also be true. But the fact is, I really enjoy looking for prototypical explanations for what happens on my layout. If you look at real railroads, you will quickly see examples of locomotives in places where you wouldn't expect them to be. There are many reasons why those locomotives might leave their home turf, and we're going to talk about those reasons in this video. When units of one railroad operate on tracks belonging to another railroad, we can refer to them as foreign power. And foreign power offers us model railroaders all kinds of interesting possibilities for our layouts. Railroads like the UP and BNSF may operate in competition with each other, but they may also work together in a variety of ways in order to serve their customers and get paid. I've come up with 8 possible reasons why a BNSF diesel might show up on tracks owned by the Union Pacific. There may be other reasons that I've overlooked, or it may be that some of these reasons are synonymous and not really separate explanations for the presence of a BNSF diesel on my layout. In any case, let's start with the least likely explanation and work our way up the list. Here's the list. First, explanation number 8, a possible merger between the UP and BNSF railroads. People often see foreign power operating on tracks owned by one railroad, and they may conclude that a merger between the two railroads is about to happen. Well, there is absolutely no reason to believe that a merger might occur between the UP and BNSF railroads. So let's dismiss this as a possible explanation and move on. Explanation number 7. Establishment of a joint line. Lines owned jointly by the UP and BNSF railroads do exist. For example, there's the Colorado joint line running from Denver south to Pueblo, Colorado. And there's the Powder River joint line, which the UP and BNSF railroads both use to haul coal out of the Powder River Basin in eastern Wyoming. But there's no reason to believe that the Union Pacific's route across southern Wyoming will ever be converted from UP ownership to joint ownership. So let's dismiss this explanation and move on. Explanation number 6. Trackage rights. Trackage rights occur when a railroad owning tracks leases the right to run on those tracks to another railroad, usually for an annual fee. If the BNSF leased the UP's tracks across southern Wyoming, then it would be able to run its trains operated by its crews on this route. An example of this would be the route crossing Colorado from Denver to Grand Junction and then on to Salt Lake City. This route is owned by the UP as a result of its acquisition of the Southern Pacific, but BNSF trains use this route by virtue of a leasing agreement. This is the same route that the California Zephyr normally runs on. This explanation is great for model railroading, but I have no reason to believe that the UP is about to lease its route across southern Wyoming to the BNSF, so we'll dismiss this explanation and move on. Explanation number 5. Leased power. Leasing occurs when one railroad leases equipment from another railroad. Let's say, for example, that the UP was short on power in southern Wyoming. So it leased a unit from the BNSF to meet its needs for horsepower there. Typically, the UP would pay an annual fee to the BNSF in the lease. It is common for railroads to do this, but the Union Pacific owns 8,500 diesels, and I have no reason to believe that it is short on power. In fact, I understand that the UP has well over 1,000 diesels parked in storage that it isn't using right now. So let's assume that the UP doesn't need to lease any BNSF diesels and move on to the next explanation for why that BNSF unit is on my layout. Explanation number 4. Rerouting. This would be a good explanation, and I like it, if I was running an entire BNSF train, headed up by BNSF diesels on my layout. Rerouting would be a plausible explanation for running BNSF trains on my layout because the BNSF can reroute its trains across southern Wyoming when its main route across Colorado is closed for maintenance and repairs, just like Amtrak does. However, until I buy at least one more BNSF diesel and maybe some BNSF freight cars as well, then I don't really have a complete BNSF train to run on my layout. So let's save this explanation for the future, and for now, move on to the next explanation. Explanation number 3. Borrowed power. Railroads borrow power from each other a lot these days. When a railroad borrows units, it can run those units as if it owned them. This is a plausible explanation for the BNSF unit on my layout. But again, I don't think there's a shortage of UP power on the prototype, and I know there's no shortage of UP diesels on my layout. Explanation number 2, shared or pooled power. Frankly, I'm not sure how this differs from explanation number 3, borrowed power. Maybe there is no difference. In any case, real railroads do share power a lot these days, and this may be the most common reason for seeing foreign power so far from home. It's also one of the main reasons why railroads are no longer broke. Diesels can pull trains regardless of who owns the tracks beneath them. Instead of swapping diesels, they just swap crews. It is easier and cheaper not to change the power. Locomotives can pull trains and make money for the railroads, so when you get right down to it, the paint scheme of the diesel doesn't really matter. So, shared power could happen on the UP's Evanston Subdivision, and it could explain the presence of that BNSF unit on my layout. Okay, explanation number one, run-through unit. The BNSF diesel on my layout could simply be a run-through unit. Let's say it originated in Cheyenne, where UP and BNSF tracks meet, and the BNSF needs to get it to Salt Lake City, where UP and BNSF tracks again converge. They could run it down to Denver and then west, but that would be a much longer route. Why not just hitchhike it, so to speak, from Cheyenne across southern Wyoming directly to Ogden and then to Salt Lake City? Given the costs of fuel and operating expenses, this explanation makes sense economically. I like to believe this is the most plausible explanation for the presence of that BNSF unit on my layout. But I could be wrong. So what do you think? What is the most plausible prototypical explanation for that BNSF diesel on my Union Pacific layout? I'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Also, I'd love to know if you run foreign power on your layout. Well, thanks for watching, and until next time, happy railroading.